We thank you so much for your presence with us in all things. We thank you that you call us to live lives of compassion that is words and prayer and solidarity and also action. We thank you for those in our congregation who are showing your way of service, who are being your hands and feet to the people you love. We ask that you bless us in this time of sharing and help these stories to reach our hearts and minds and call each of us into the ways we can show your love in tangible ways. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. I know that some of you may be leaving, that's fine. And if you need to come back and get some dessert or something like that, feel free to move around a little bit if you need to. I've got some slides and stuff like that to put up on here. There will be 5 of us sharing today. Cindy and I will probably do the bulk of the sharing, and then Silas and Tim Hirschberger and Gwen Hirschberger will do some sharing as well. So I will just jump right in. I'll begin with just some basic information about MDS. MDS consists of local, regional, and national responses. Local responses are generally short-term and require relatively minimal funding. A local response might include the initial cleanup after a storm or other natural disaster. And Dean Eshelman is our point person for that here with MDS. So he would be the person that would probably get that information and reach out to the congregation if they needed that help. A regional response is somewhat longer term and can be upgraded to a national response. Flooding in Detroit in 2014, if you remember that, was a regional response. And the responses that Cindy and I and some others were involved in Amory, Mississippi and in Conroe, Texas were national responses. Funding, volunteer lodging, construction and renovations, and other long-term efforts make for national response. An important point with national response is that MDS always needs an invitation from a long-term care group or long-term recovery group, which is a local church, agency, or government group that is overseeing the local disaster response. And MDS has worked with these groups and many more. After a disaster in the U.S., some of you may know what FEMA stands for, but it really stands for Find Every Mennonite Available. MDS is well known throughout the country for their disaster response, and actually this was said by a FEMA person at a seminar one day. For me, there are 2 areas of MDS work that have been fascinating to reflect on. One is the decision-making involved in selecting whether a home or homeowner qualifies for MDS. The second is the homeowners themselves and hearing their stories. So once an area is selected by the MDS National Office, how are individual projects chosen? Usually the project director, the local project director, the construction supervisor, and the long-term caseworker decide on whether a specific housing project is undertaken. So join me now as we pretend to decide whether we can accept this job in Conroe, Texas. This was an actual decision that we had to make. This home is owned by a single, older African-American woman who has lived there for a very long time. The back part of the house has a living space that was previously a quasi 3 seasons room that has been converted into a living room. You can't see it very well, but the roof above that living room is a patio roof, like an aluminum patio roof. A drop ceiling was installed under the patio roof in the living room, and there is no insulation in this part of the roof. The patio roof leaks, and it appears that there are leaks where the patio roof attaches to the original roof of the house. There's mold in the kitchen walls, which are underneath the original roof, and there's certainly mold in the living room where the patio roof is. So do we accept the job? But first, a couple more considerations. At the very least, the construction supervisor would like to address the leaks. But even our smallest and lightest volunteer won't be supported by that patio roof to accomplish that work. We could create some sort of scaffolding or even replace a patio roof with a framed roof. That job would likely turn into replacing the entire roof. So are we ready to accept the job? But wait, there's more, like the commercials say. We need to look at the mold in the kitchen, and we suspect that the leaks are also causing damage to the floor because the floor is spongy as we walk on it. This potential job brings up a dilemma that we see often, which has been called creep. Creep the verb, not the noun. A leaky roof that should be simple and relatively easy to repair in normal circumstances could easily turn into a $20,000 to $30,000 job. So again, do we accept this work? Oh yeah, one more consideration. We only have 3 more weeks of volunteers, and during one of those weeks, we only have 3 volunteers, a father and 2 teenage sons. And we've already committed to one 5 to 6 week job, one that Michael Grieser worked on for a little while, and we've committed to other projects. We are simply short of volunteers and time. So even though this project would have been fully funded by a city grant, we had to say no. In the months of June, July, and August, MDS repaired 28 houses in Conroe, Texas. But we didn't repair this one. And so this woman continues to live with a leaky roof and mold in her kitchen and spongy floors. So the successes are incredible for us and very satisfying, but the times like this when we have to say no are heartbreaking for me. From Richard Rohr's Daily Meditations on August 8. The preaching of the gospel pulls the rug out from under us, and we have to put our life on a new footing. First, we have to act. We have to cross over a threshold and live differently so that we're compelled to think differently and accept challenging questions. To get a real grasp of the gospel's truth, we have to cross over and enter into solidarity with at least one person who's different than us. I've embraced that thinking as I enter into each day of my work with MDS. So let's cross that threshold together and move into the living spaces of a few of my new acquaintances. Some of these people I don't have pictures for. I think you understand why. I met George this spring in Amory, Mississippi. He's a schizophrenic African-American man of about 50. He lives alone in a house that his sister owns, and she lives next door. I know nothing about working or relating with someone with schizophrenia. But somehow I managed to gain George's trust and requested with the project director that I continue to work there until the project was complete. After moving his kitchen stuff out to prepare for work on his kitchen ceiling, George noticed that a small set of plasticware was missing. You know, like 5 spoons, 5 forks, 5 knives, a small set. As soon as he came to let us in the next morning, I knew he was agitated. He accused Mary Ellen, one of our weekly volunteers, of stealing the plasticware. When I assured him that she would never do that, he then began to think of a couple of neighbors who would steal from him. Now, on the surface, this is ridiculous, right? Of all the stuff in his kitchen, someone is going to come in and steal a set of plasticware. But as I stepped back a bit and tried to think and look at this differently, I realized that it wasn't about the cost, which was only $1.25. He didn't appear to wash his dishes every day, so this small set got him through 5 days of eating, and the nearest Dollar Tree was 2.5 miles away, and he had to walk. This was about convenience for him. So I went to Dollar Tree and replaced his plasticware with a match set, and George gave me a big hug for $1.25. At Tamara and Rudy's house in Conroe, where Silas helped, we met their daughter Isabella, who is a shy and quiet 17-year-old girl, and their 15-year-old son, Randy, who is severely autistic and apparently nonverbal. Their house was damaged by a tree that fell into the living room. Tamara describes it as a 1-minute storm associated with Hurricane Beryl, even though they did not receive much other impact from that hurricane. Tamara said they got some wind, and all of a sudden a tree crashed into their house, and it changed their lives forever. The volunteers before us repaired the drywall and replaced the floor in the living room. Our group replaced flooring in 4 bedrooms, doing Randy's first so that he could get back to his normal living arrangement and be more secure. The previous crew leader told me that when Randy came into the room with his mother or dad or his caregiver, that they would stop all work and be quiet to let him pass. I went a little beyond that by saying hello to Randy several times, and by the fourth or fifth day, as I was walking past him when he was sitting on the couch, he reached out to me, and I gently squeezed his hand for a couple of seconds. He didn't do that again while I was there, but it seemed significant. Am I on the right slide, do you think? I think so, that's right. When we got to Isabella's room, we helped her move the furniture out. She had carpet on the floor, which was also removed. Isabella stood at the door and watched, so I asked her if she would like to come in and see what we were doing. That's Isabella there. She said she had never seen carpet installed or removed, and so I showed her and explained the process. She seemed fascinated, and in a quiet voice, she then asked if she could have her walls painted the same color as her brother's. Of course you can. I rallied the troops, so to speak, as that would put us behind schedule. But we had all hands on deck and took an extra couple of hours to paint her walls. I asked her if she would like to help paint, and she said yes. So I asked Lynette, one of our volunteers who is a school teacher at a one-room school in Iowa, to be her mentor. Lynette was a wonderful, patient mentor to Isabella, even suggesting to Isabella that she could paint her walls any color she wanted in the future. When we got to the flooring, I again asked Lynette to teach Isabella how to lay floor. So Isabella learned how to do some flooring. And this is my favorite MDS picture. I even showed Isabella how to use a pneumatic finish nailer to put in a couple of finish nails on the trim. She wasn't 17, she was 17, but she was too young for an MDS person to do it, but I think I got away with it. She was so excited to be part of the process. She learned that she can do some repairs that she never dreamed of doing, and she began to follow me around with the other jobs at the house. She was fascinated by the simple thing next day when I removed the door from the garage to the house and replaced it. I also showed her how to remove the pin in the isabella and add lubricant to stop the hinge from squeaking. Isabella seemed to come out of her shell Isabella seemed to come out of her shell and warmly greet me and the others every morning. And she and her mom came to have supper with us one night at the unit. Interestingly, the next week when we did Rudy and Tamar's, Isabella's mom room, they also needed carpet to be removed, and Tamar also asked to see the process firsthand. Tamar brings us to the second type of creep. Again, the verb, not the noun. But first, let me say that I seldom saw her smile. She seemed to me to be a woman with the weight of the world on her shoulders. She pushed for her rights, and rightly so. She needed to stand up for herself and for her family, and I can't even imagine the challenges that she and her husband Rudy have with raising Randy, getting quality schooling for him and keeping him occupied and safe throughout the summer. But she asked us to do things that we felt were beyond the scope of what we needed to do to make her house a safer and a better place to live. Rudy asked me if we could repair some holes in the drywall in the garage. Sorry, Rudy, we only work in living spaces and not in garages. So I'm afraid not. Tamara wondered why we couldn't paint the walls and replace the trim work in the guest bedroom. While we agreed to do some painting, for instance, in Randy's room and in Isabella's room, we simply needed to say no to some of the other requests. Now, we found that those types of requests among homeowners are not unusual. People who have been living in disrepair for so long finally have someone available they can trust and who care for them. So why can't we do this or that as well? It's hard to say no, and the line really becomes blurry very often. In our training with MDS, we're encouraged to put down our hammers and listen to people's stories. I love to do that. It is the most fulfilling part of what I do with MDS, and I've gotten to know some amazing people who have changed my life. And my hope is that in some small way, I have helped bring a positive change to theirs. So, yeah, thanks. I might add that if you have questions about any of this stuff, maybe we could save those until every one of us has spoken a little bit to do that.
Okay, as Dan said, we serve as part of a long-term leadership group, which when you go to a project, it consists of a project director, an office manager, construction supervisor, at least 2 crew leaders, a cook, and an assistant cook. And in Texas, it was great to have Gwen with us as our assistant cook. This building in Conroe was our home base. It is an office warehouse building owned by the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. They use it for things very similar to our MCC Material Resource Center here in Goshen. They do a lot of that same type of work. The front area is air conditioned, and that is where the kitchen was, a large meeting area where we ate meals, and other rooms that were offices that we made into bedrooms, and where some of our leadership team people stayed. Real quick, I'll tell you about our bedroom. So about the 5th night when we were there, I walk into our bedroom and something looked a little bit strange on our floor fan. It looked like somebody had wrapped the string around the handle. So I looked a little closer and I see this little head poking out from under the handle. And I go, Dan, is that a snake? Yes, it was. And so I have a freak out moment. And so he goes off to look for something to put it in, I guess, or something. But I couldn't wait, so I go to the next room and get the guy in the next room. And I said, Dave, come here, you gotta help me. And so he comes over and he says, you know, Cindy, I don't like snakes either. But he very cautiously picked up the floor fan. I ran out and opened the front door wide open, and he carries the fan out way out into the grass and dumps it off of the fan. So that took care of that snake. And every night thereafter, before I got into bed, I checked under the covers, and every morning I checked inside my shoes to be sure there was nothing there. Never saw another snake until about 2 days before we left, crawling on the sidewalk outside of the building. So I survived that one. Anyway, as office manager, I am responsible for the project's financial accounting, communications, and hospitality needs. I enjoy greeting the weekly volunteers when they arrive on Sunday afternoon and help them to get settled into their accommodations, and then helping to lead the orientation meeting that evening. A typical week, the work days start early at 6:30 in the morning to come pack your lunches, eat breakfast at 7, have devotions at 7:30, leave for sites by 8 a.m. with the trucks loaded and the tools needed for the day in the trucks. Crews return to the unit around 4 or 5 in that afternoon, get showers, and are ready to eat supper at 6. Gwen talked Silas into making curry for us one evening because the Old Order Mennonite girls had never tasted curry. So I think it was a hit. At 6:30 p.m., each crew shares about their day's work, and then the leadership team usually meets at 7 to plan the day. If we have any energy left, free time in the evening is usually a fun time of socializing by playing volleyball, board games, singing, or just relaxing. One day during the week, the cooks and I often go with the project director to take donuts or ice cream around to the volunteers at the work site. And this gives us a chance to see the sites and see what the volunteers are doing, because otherwise we're mainly back at the center. At the end of the week on Friday, the workday usually ends around 3, and crews come back to organize the tool trailers and wash all the vehicles. And then most groups often will leave after that, but some will stay around until Saturday morning. Twice a month, our leadership team does some kind of a team building activity or gets taken out for a meal. The Catfish and Hush Puppies in Mississippi from Aunt Bee's Soul Food Restaurant are amazing. And the steak fajitas were the best ever at a Tex-Mex restaurant near Houston. I'll highlight a few of our projects. At Gracie's house in Amory, Mississippi, a new roof was put on, half the house was gutted, and part of an exterior wall had to be removed and rebuilt. The construction supervisor was unsure how this should be done, but we had an amazing group of volunteers from Shore Church who came up with the perfect plan and took over. We had the right crew at the right time, and that happens so often. It was just amazing how that works. Gracie and her husband are pastors at a small United Methodist church, which we attended several times. A crew did an amazing job on a roofing project in Texas. It was 95 degrees those few days, and so they had to stop working around 1 o'clock because the shingles got too hot, and so they could no longer walk on the roof without damaging shingles. This was their finished project in the back, and they also did the front. This is Dan's crew replacing a floor with their shirts sweated wet. A man cutting weeds in the backyard at this house told them that he had killed 2 copperhead snakes that day, so they're around. The house where Michael Greaser was working took longer than expected because the crew the week before found lots of termites behind a wall in the drywall in the living room. So you never know what a project might lead to. At both Amory and Conroe, the project director and I organized home dedications for 2 projects that had major repairs done. It is so rewarding to see the relief and the contentment on the homeowner's face as they now have their homes restored and to pray God's blessing over them. At Gracie's house, they were gifted a wall hanging. And the mayor of Amory and the caseworkers also came and attended that home dedication. In Texas, at the Springfield's home, we planted trees for them, a crepe myrtle tree and a fig tree. After 6 months of working in Amory, Mississippi, we were the last group of volunteers, and we closed that site at the end of March. 60 homes were restored over those 6 months, and over 400 volunteers made an impact on that community. At Conroe, Texas, we temporarily closed the site at the end of August, but MDS plans to return there in January, and they hope to build at least 4 new homes because they were able to secure a donation from the Salvation Army for $750,000. So that was very significant. MDS is hard work, but is very rewarding. And I often think of the people that I have met, and their stories will remain with me. So if you have any interest in volunteering, we would love to talk to you about that.
Silas, you can start coming up. I want to read what Michael Grieser said. He wasn't able to be here today. He shares, I always experienced serving with MDS to be an honor. Highlights include relating with homeowners, helping make houses safe, and bringing a bit of hope to those affected by life-altering disasters. I appreciate the way MDS invites volunteers of any ability level and the emphasis they place on building relationships along with building structures to improve lives of recipients and volunteers. So now a person of any skill level, we have Silas.
That is true. I'm a person of no skill when it comes to this stuff. But I think that's what made it really a fun time. I really liked what the speaker at the service today said about being there for your neighbor, being a part of what it is to be a part of the kingdom of God. It feels like the work that MDS does is really all about that. I think it's not just being able to interact with the homeowners, but interact with other people. I had no idea what it was to be a conservative Mennonite, and for me, it's the same as Amish, and you know, I wouldn't know any better. So it was super nice to be able to speak with Lynette, be able to speak with a few of the others, play volleyball with them, understand the differences, understand the nuances, why people do what they do. It was really impactful and gave me a lot to think about in the following weeks too. I think it was just, MDS was such a special opportunity. I only went because of Michael Grieser. We were at one of our normal breakfasts, and he said he was going in a few weeks. He wasn't sure. I said I would love to tag along. And we had this great plan about being at the same work site and, you know, talking all day long, but we weren't assigned to the same work site. So things change, and I think that's part of what I really admired about MDS. This was my second time. The first time was with Goshen College, and both times I've just been so amazed that MDS it's hard stuff to put it together. It's working with multiple organizations. Everybody doesn't always get along, but I think just people have this amazing ability to put things aside and say, you know, the work we're doing, it's important, and it doesn't mean we always have to agree, but it means we understand that we have to keep going. So that was just, it was amazing to see. It was so inspiring to see as someone my age, just the work that they were able to do. Being with the homeowner, it was really eye-opening, the kind of conditions that some people live in, even with all of the wealth that is there to go around. So I think MDS makes a big difference in their lives. And you might have seen another person with me named Nathan. He lives in Elkhart. I would have never met him, and we just had a blast. We became such good friends. We still text each other and stay in touch and are hoping to meet for brunch sometime. But yeah, it's great.
Gwen, do you or Tim want to jump in? I also asked Tim or Gwen to share about their work in Hawaii a little bit that they did within the last year or so. I don't know what you're going to say. Yeah.
Well, I guess I've done a fair number of MDS projects over the years, and there's more to MDS than the cool swag, which is out there and available. Silas, you mentioned your first one was with Goshen College. Mine was too. Back in around 1970 in Gulfport, Mississippi, a bunch of Goshen College students went down there after a hurricane. I think there was two big van loads of folks went down. And that was my first experience with it. We've had a number of others. We've been in Ay Bonito in Puerto Rico. My goodness, with Kenny Mullet, he was down in Bayou La Batre, and I was able to go down and visit with him and MDS down there. With even in Tucson, where we have been going for the winters, there is a project called Casa Cardo, which was funded by Thistle Farms that Naomi mentioned a few months back, which is a landing spot for moms who have been just come out of detention, typically new immigrants. And we helped out with that. Fred was there too, Fred Driver. We have been in Tucson with SOUP, which is another program which used to be known as Service Opportunities for Older People, and they have renamed as Service Opportunities with Our Partners. The last winter when we were there, there's a fellow who named Don Reinheimer, who I think used to live in this same area at some point, who knew us and he took the liberty to give us an invite with a week's notice to ask if we were interested. The two people had backed out, would we be interested in going to Maui, of all places, for 3 weeks, and we got to leave in 1 week. We looked at each other and said, yeah, probably. I'm not sure why we left paradise to go to Tucson, to go to Maui, but we did. All of Hawaii, not all of Hawaii is white and lush and green and just beautiful place. Where we went, next to Kahului, which is where the airport is, was a construction site. And it was between a couple of different mountain ranges where the wind blew through all day long, hard. It was dusty, it was dirty, and we spent 3 weeks there. We were able to go and visit around the island on the weekends. But this was a place where a local church, King's Cathedral, which you might liken to, I don't know, some of the big mega churches around here, they had some extra land, and across the road from their church, about 30 acres, I think, and it used to be a pineapple plantation. And they have been working with homeless folks. This is one of those agencies that Dan talked about. That it's a longer-term agency in the community. And they had a lot of work that they did with homeless. Well, by golly, when the fires ravaged through Lahaina, there was a lot more homeless people than in Maui than usual. So they decided they were going to make use of that land, and they managed to bring in from Hungary, of all places. It was like a collapsible, you think about these cargo containers that you see on the trains that go through Goshen all the time, but it had fold-in sides. They brought 80 of these. They flew them over from Hungary, and all they needed to do was put them on foundations in this field and make it available for people to live. And that's what we were involved with. I'm sorry I don't have any pictures because it's kind of bizarre when you see what they were. But there were 11 of us there during the 3 weeks we were there. We were there to finish out the term there on that particular project. And I guess some things that I would have to say about MDS is sometimes you know what you're going to do when you get there. And sometimes you don't know, and you know that you don't know. And sometimes you knew what you were going to do, but you ended up doing something completely different. And that happens more frequently than what one might like. But one of the things that you need to learn when you go on a project is, I guess, is to be flexible. Be flexible. Because I did not enjoy the first week of hanging drywall over my head most of the time. But we made it through, and I didn't have to do it after that. But it was good. There were 11 people there with our group from Canada, from the US. There were people from various political persuasions there. And another part of learning in units in places like this is you're there to complete a project together, and maybe you keep your mouth shut about some other things. That was a challenge for me. What else?
Puerto Rico. That you were in Puerto Rico.
Well, yeah, we were in Puerto Rico, and Gwen was in charge of all the cooking there, so she got her lead in to MDS cooking down there, and I was the project director for about a month and a half when the leaders came back and needed to get some things squared away, and they asked us to come down. We closed that unit down too. Now the Maui unit is going to open up again. In fact, it is open now in Lahaina. It's a different type of a situation. They're not building temporary housing. They are building permanent housing on the lots where people had lost their homes. So that is something that's likely going to be going for the next 3 to 5 years. And that is an opportunity that any of you and I mean it, any of you could get involved with. Not right now because there's full right now, but there's plenty of opportunities along the way, and it would be a beautiful place to go.
So when you think about Maui, I thought about someplace gorgeous to go, but when I went, it was hard work. So that's what I want to say is that I was on the crew that worked, and so I did many things. So one of the things was some of these units had been laying out in the dirt, or in the dust and dirt for a year, and we were to scrub them and clean them up. That was almost impossible because with fine dirt, if you put water on it, it turns to mud. So we had creative ways of doing that. I also put together furniture. There was some Souter furniture that went into each of the units. They had two cabinets. They had a bunk bed and a double bed and several end tables. Those were items from Souders that we needed to put together. So that was another different experience for me. I was the one in front of the instructions instead of usually I'm handing the tools to him, right? So I was there with the instructions and putting that together. Again, new stuff. Hard work, long hours, but MDS is a wonderful place to be. I was invited to go back to Conroe, Texas, in August, to go there, and that was another great experience. I think the organization is very organized and is put together, and it's comfortable when you come in because you know your job. So my job was to help the head cook put meals on the table. So I was up at 5:45, getting things ready for breakfast, getting things out for everyone, and shopping. So little things like that, cutting up vegetables, putting salads together, you name it. So those are the fun things that I did. But again, long hours, but a good, memorable experience.
A week's notice.
With a week's notice, yeah.
Tim talked about differences among people, and Gwen talked about her main job. Her main job actually was to keep me from strangling the head cook. And that she was successful in that, so that was good. I might say Cindy and I have accepted a role in Elk, Washington in January, and I will be a project director at that one, and Cindy will be the office manager. So we'll be working closely together for that one in January. So we're not sure what the start date's going to be yet. It's getting late, but if you have questions or anything like that for any of us, we'd be glad to take a couple minutes for that. But I don't want to keep you here too long either. So. Well, nab us sometime if you have questions, if you have interest, if you just wonder if this might be something for you to do sometime. The answer is probably yes. I will say that if you go to Maui, they will actually help you with airfare going down there. They have a stipend of $800 for somebody to get there. Usually, it's up to the volunteers to make their way there. So, thank you for sticking around today.